Rather than focusing on saving up for a big pot full of money that you will most likely not be able to spend in your lifetime, live your life to the fullest now. Chase memorable life experiences, give money to your kids when they can best use it, and donate money to charity while you're still alive. That was an excerpt from the book that Matt and I just finished reading. It's called Die with Zero by Bill Perkins. And we thought it was really good, and we wanted to make a podcast and record an episode about it and share it with you all, just to kind of give our thoughts from a financial planning perspective and just our thoughts overall on the book. Matt, did you have any opening things?
Oh man, there's a lot, I think, in this book for us to think about and talk about. It would not be an understatement to say this was one of the most interesting and impactful books I've read in a long time as far as raising questions that are important about life and finances. And I know that sounds grandiose, but I really did take a lot out of this. I'm excited to talk through it.
So I think the first main section we wanted to talk about was titled Optimize Your Life, or Maximize Your Positive Life Experiences. And the point that Perkins is making with this is we think that the path to financial freedom is through frugality. So we which is true, but we spend our whole life being frugal, living simply. We're not spending a lot of money, and then we get to the end of our life and we've lived a frugal life and maybe not experienced the things that we could have with the money that we earn throughout the course of our lifetime. So his argument is that experiences are what make life worthwhile, and specifically by going through an experience, it pays what he calls a memory dividend, which I thought was actually an interesting term. Meaning a memory dividend is something that you receive when you have an experience, and then as time goes on, you can reflect back on that, and that memory still gives you a benefit. So over time, you have basically a collection of all these memories as your life goes on, and they still, provide you benefit 20, 30 years down the line because you're reflecting on all the cool things that you did throughout your life.
Yeah, and I think the part that I found most interesting was the experience, and I think you said, Stephen, the memory dividend, so just the idea of life being all about experiences. And I think what he's really getting at least my personal opinion, is life is really all about relationships, and relationships are built by time and experiences, shared experiences with people that you're building relationships with, be it family, friends, or whoever. And the thought-provoking question for me here was, how should I spend my time at different points in my life, during my early working years, my midlife, during my later working years? It raised a new question for me, not a new question, but I guess raised the question in a new way of how should I be allocating my time between work and, experiences and building relationships with friends and family and others.
And Matt, I think an important thing to point out here is that the target audience for this book is people who tend to be oversavers versus people that spend all their money. So I think that's an important caveat as we were kind of talking about this, is if it's your natural inclination to sock money away and not spend it, then I think that this book kind of really aligns well with you. And personally, that's kind of where I line up and fall in. I don't know, Matt, if you fall in similar categories of kind of being a saver versus a spender.
Yeah, the temptation to always accumulate more, I think, is definitely something I've been battling against personally in my own life and in my own career journey. And I love the example that he shared of his friend John, who was a hedge fund manager, who I think retired at 38 with $4 billion of personal net worth from having done very well as a hedge fund manager. And the question that Bill raised about his friend John is basically looking back, and I don't think he gives the answer from John in the book, but basically thinking through John's eyes, it's like, well, should I have retired at $3 billion or $2 billion or $1 billion? Was it really worth it to keep working those extra few years to get to $4 billion? And I think Bill's thesis is no, It wasn't worth it, because the value of the time from ages 34 to 38 is worth more than the $3 billion excess dollars that you accumulated. As crazy as that sounds to say.
Yeah. So I think to wrap up kind of the point number one is Bill saying, hey, fill your life with experiences, and we would add to that of probably the deeper meaning is fill your life with really good relationships, and relationships are the key to good experiences.
Yeah.
And be intentional with those experiences that you do have. So after that, his next big, I think, section talks about aiming to die with zero, which is kind of a smack you in the face type of wordage. That's probably people's biggest fear is dying with zero, to be honest, or running out of money. So to kind of hit us with this is a good wake-up call, I think, to us. And the point, again, that he's making is when you look at the statistics or the data when people's net worth over the course of their life, so what we see is that on average, or the median net worth actually continues to rise as people get older. And again, in context, this is people who are generally oversavers. They've accumulated enough and they're having trouble really putting that to work. And what we see is when you hit 60, 70, 80, 90, your net worth just keeps increasing as time goes on instead of actually decreasing, which, is our biggest fear of running out of money. So he's kind of harping on that and saying, hey, kind of wake up here. You're going to die with more money than you have today. What are you going to do about it? And how are you going to change your life so that you can actually bring some of that money back into the present when it can be more useful?
Yeah, I think he shared some spending numbers to really hammer that point home, Stephen, about how the amount that I guess the median retiree has at retirement ends up being more than they end up needing. And he talked about how the spending numbers, I think he said the average or the median 55 to 64-year-old spends $65,000 a year. But then if you fast forward 20 years to 75 plus, now you're spending only $45,000 a year. And that's despite higher healthcare costs. And so if you use the rule of thumb of 4% is the amount of safe withdrawal you can make from your portfolio and live comfortably. Okay, well, spending $65,000 a year requires a portfolio that's like 50% larger than a portfolio than a spending level of only $45,000. So just the decline in spending that happens is maybe not what most people expect to happen as they get older and I guess are limited in mobility and other things, but just really goes to show that the amount most people end up saving at retirement is more than they end up needing to fund their retirement.
Yeah. Another stat that he pulled was that spending ratios of retirees is 1-to-1. So what they take in and what they spend is basically evens out. So again, they're not overspending or they're not spending down their portfolio or their net worth. And their portfolio balances are basically just continue to compounding and grow and just sitting there and not being used.
Yeah, and back to your earlier point, Stephen, I don't know that we would suggest everyone try actually to die with $0 in their account because there's definitely a lot of risk involved in trying to do that perfectly. But I think the framework that Bill introduces with this book raises an important question of, well, how much money is enough and then how much is too much? And to the extent people have too much, well, what should they do with it?
Yeah.
And that's really good food for thought.
Yeah. So I think you need to go back and say, hey, why am I so reluctant to spend down this money? I think is a really good question to ask ourselves, because we can get caught in the trap of just accumulating, and it feels good to accumulate and it feels good to see those numbers go up. But if it's just numbers in a bank account, then there's no utility to it. You're going to die and it's going to go to somewhere else and someone else is going to spend it or the government's going to take it. So kind of just reevaluate, hey, what are we trying to accomplish here?
Yeah, and a fascinating stat that he shared was, I think based on Federal Reserve data, if I remember correctly, but the average age of inheritance for people who inherit money from their parents or grandparents is age 60. And I think as we've discussed on this podcast in recent episodes, that's probably not the ideal age that most people would choose to inherit money at as far as when that money could make the most difference on somebody in their stage of life. And yeah, I think his point as far as the die with zero framework is if you're going to give money to your kids, you don't need to wait until you die, which on average would mean you're 80 and your kids are 60, because then their kids are already done with college and maybe raising families of their own. And all that to say, it raises the question of, okay, well, when is the right time to give money to the kids and how much should I give to the kids versus charity versus spend on myself and my own experiences? And that's all really important questions that I think most people probably don't spend enough time on.
Yeah. And sometimes the easy answer is, oh, my kids will just get it and it'll all just get worked out after I'm gone. But I don't know. I just really like the fact of living your life with intentionality and saying, hey, this is what I want the money to mean to my kids, and this is the impact that I want it to have when it's going to have the most impact, versus just kind of saying, hey, you know what, I'm just going to accumulate, and then after I'm gone, they'll figure it out and, move along. I don't know. That just feels like a little bit of shortchange, because you've worked so hard for something, you might as well see the benefit of it. One last point I wanted to bring up was for the people that are worried about, say, what happens if I get Alzheimer's and need memory care, or I get cancer and I need that money for the treatment. He argues that you should get a insurance, basically, to insure against those things happening, specifically long-term care insurance and that sort of thing. What we find, I think, as planners is, since long-term care is so expensive right now, one of the things that you can do is fund a brokerage account. Instead of putting $400,000, say, into a long-term care policy, put $400,000 into a brokerage account, invest it, have it grow over the next 10, 20, 30 years. Be your own kind of insurance fund. So if you need it, then it's there for you. And if you don't, then you still have that money that's available to you. I guess the other thing that you can also think about is your home equity can be a great resource for long-term care expenses later down the line. Because if you run into a situation where you need to be moved into a assisted living facility, you're gonna have to sell your house, and that's gonna be an asset that you can use then to pay for those expenses.
Yeah, I was gonna mention, I think it was a Ron Blue or Randy Alcorn comment from another book, but the idea that at the end of your life, your money is going to one of three places: your family, a charity, or the government. And I guess the long-term care policy introduces a fourth party, which is an insurance company.
Yeah.
And I think our advice would be, you don't need to necessarily introduce that fourth party, because you can self-insure, like you said, Stephen, and to the extent you don't end up needing the money, you can send it to either kids or charity, or the government if you have enough to do that. But we don't necessarily advise that as the best option.
So this next section, which was my personal favorite, Matt, was called time bucketing, or that strategy. So the premise of it is that there's a season for everything, and that there's certain points over the course of your life where it's better to do things versus later. For example, you can do things when you're 40 or 50 or 60 that you cannot do when you're 90. One thing that pops to mind is, skiing or traveling, or even wanting to travel. I know my grandparents, they don't want to travel. They want to stay as close to home as possible. So with that kind of as the frame, what stage of life are you in right now, and what things are you maybe delaying for the future that you should actually bring into the present to have those experiences?
Yeah, he had another interesting framework of many that he had in this book, where he said the optimal time to achieve your peak in net worth, I think he said, was ages 45 to 60, which is when most people probably have kids that can do stuff with them. They're still in good health. They have enough money to afford to go where they want to go and do what they want to do. Basically bucking against the trend or the idea of waiting until 60 to, travel the world, go on cruises, and do whatever else you plan on doing when you're retired and totally free. His point is, you might be better off spending that money sooner when you have better health and your kids are still around and it's easier to pull some of those things off.
And one final, I guess, little tidbit or exercise that you can do, and I actually did this for myself, is you can create a timeline of your age over the next 10, 20, 30 years, and then overlap that with the ages of your kids, or if you're a grandparent, your grandkids, and see what those ages line up as. And that was a very enlightening exercise to see, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be, 50 years old when they're entering college or just leaving college. Or, they're going to be 8, 9, and 10, 11, those prime, just kid years before they become teenagers, and that'll be a whole another game. But moments that we can create memories as a family. What do we want to do during those time periods? So I would encourage anyone really to kind of do this for themselves, and then map it onto grandkids and say, hey, when I'm 60, 70, what are the experiences that I want to have with my grandkids, and how old are they going to be when I'm that age, versus, when I'm 90, and you're probably not going to, I don't know, go hike the Grand Canyon when you're 90 years old.
Yeah, totally. That's a great exercise.
All right. Last section is know when to stop growing your wealth. And you talked about this a second ago, Matt, was kind of the peak age range for your net worth is between 45 and 60. Matt, what did you think about him saying that the net worth is a point in time versus a number?
Yeah, I think that's not the way most people think about it.
Yeah.
Most people probably have a number in mind of here's where I need to get to, achieve the life that I want and have financial independence or freedom or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, thinking of it as a moving target in something that changes with time is definitely not the way most people think about it. So it's counterintuitive for sure.
Yeah. Because in reality, no number is ever going to feel like enough. Once when you have $2 million, you're going to say, oh, if I had $2.5 million, that's an extra $500,000. What great experiences I could do with an extra $500,000. But then once when you get 2.5, you go, oh my gosh, well, just a little bit longer, I could have 3 million. That's an extra $1 million of experiences that I could have. So let's wait and not do it for the 500,000. Let's wait till we have $1 million and go all out then. But then the goalpost just keeps moving on down the line. So his point is to say, like, hey, stop doing that. Go spend your money now on the things that you have right in front of you while you still can.
Yeah, I think it's really wise and powerful advice to try and guard against the temptation to just keep accumulating, whereas his recommendation, I think, is much better and probably much more fulfilling in the span of someone's life to say, rather than just continuing to save 2, 3, 4, 5, however many millions of dollars or billions in the case of his friend John, try and focus more on spending and giving it, because that will actually bring more fulfillment through experiences like you talked about with building relationships on the spending side, and then also just the joy and satisfaction that comes from giving charitably on the donation aspect.
Yeah. Just be careful to not be seduced by the power of money is really what it comes down to. So as we wrap up here, Bill Perkins says, hey, accumulate only up to a certain level of net worth, and then anything beyond that is spent or given away. Well, Matt, this was a fun conversation. Hopefully folks got something out of this. Thanks to you for being here, and thanks to Kevin, our editor. And we'll see you guys next time.
Yep.